The laughter wasn't harmless. It was sharp, deliberate, aimed. The teenagers leaned in close, whispering jokes just loud enough to hurt. Then one of them nudged the metal crutch with his shoe. Just a tap. Enough to make the old veteran stumble. Enough to remind him how fragile dignity can be. The diner froze. Phones came up. Fear took hold. Then the door opened. A man in a faded multicam jacket stepped inside, dog tags resting against his chest. Beside him, a German shepherd sat perfectly still. One chair scraped the floor, and suddenly, silence was afraid. The morning wind off the water carried the smell of salt and old wood, the kind that worked its way into your clothes and stayed there long after you left. Harbor Point woke slowly, like a town that had learned not to rush anything. Not the tide, not the weather, not its people. The gulls argued above the docks. Somewhere, a bell rang once and stopped. Ethan Walker parked his truck at the edge of the lot and sat for a moment with the engine off. He wore a faded multicam jacket that had seen better years. The fabric thinned at the elbows, the colors dulled by sun and time. On his head sat a worn cap that read, U.S. Army Veteran, the stitching frayed but intact. 2 dog tags rested against his chest, tucked beneath a gray shirt, tapping softly when he breathed. On his left wrist, a large black military-style watch caught the weak morning light. Scarred, practical, still keeping perfect time. Beside him, Rex waited. The German shepherd sat upright in the passenger seat, brown and black coat clean and dense, muscles visible beneath fur shaped by discipline rather than vanity. His ears stood straight, alert but calm. Around his neck was not a pet collar, but a tactical one. Matte, reinforced, the name Rex stamped into it with purpose. His amber eyes tracked the world without impatience, the way soldiers watched a horizon they respected. Ethan opened the door. Rex stepped down smoothly and fell into position at his side, close enough to touch but never crowding. They moved together toward the diner like men who had learned the value of spacing. The Lighthouse Diner sat just off the main road, windows fogged slightly from heat and coffee. It wasn't fancy. Vinyl booths, a counter with chrome edges dulled by decades of elbows, and a bell above the door that rang with a tired sincerity. Ethan paused before entering, one hand resting briefly at Rex's collar, not to restrain him, but to acknowledge him. Inside, the bell chimed. Conversations dipped, then resumed. Forks scraped plates. The smell of bacon, toast, and something fried yesterday hung in the air. Ethan took it in with a quiet scan, habit more than caution. He chose a booth by the window where he could see the water and the door at the same time. Rex sat beside the booth, back straight, tail still, eyes moving. He did not beg. He did not lie down. He waited. Marianne noticed them immediately. She was in her early 50s, tall, shoulders slightly rounded from years of carrying more than she was paid to. Her hair, once blonde, had settled into an ash color and was pulled back in a low ponytail that refused to stay neat. Freckles dotted her fair skin like constellations she'd stopped counting. When she smiled, it wasn't practiced. "Morning," she said, already reaching for a menu she knew Ethan wouldn't read. "Morning," Ethan replied. One word, calm, respectful. "Coffee?" "Yes, ma'am." She set the mug down without comment and glanced at Rex. "Same rules as always," she said gently. Rex didn't move. Marianne smiled a little more and walked away. Ethan wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the warmth settle into his fingers. Outside, the water shifted color as clouds moved overhead. He watched it the way he watched most things, quietly, from a distance, as if closeness might ask something of him he wasn't ready to give. The door chimed again. An older man stepped inside, moving carefully, aluminum crutches clicking softly against the tile. His name was Walter Briggs, though most people in town just called him Mr. Briggs. He had been tall once. Now his back curved slightly, not from age alone, but from the way life had asked him to bend and never offered to straighten him again. His hair was thin and white, his face lined with things that didn't come from laughter. One leg dragged just enough to make every step a calculation. He paused, steadying himself, eyes flicking around the room with the caution of someone who had learned attention could turn sharp. Marianne was already there. "Sits open," she said softly, nodding toward a booth near the aisle. "Soup today?" Walter nodded, grateful. "Please." Ethan watched without staring. Rex's ears shifted slightly, acknowledging movement, then returned forward. The old man settled with care, placing his crutches beside him like tools he respected but did not love. For a few minutes, the diner found its rhythm again. Then the door opened hard. Laughter spilled in first, loud and careless, followed by 4 teenage boys in expensive jackets that didn't belong to a town like Harbor Point. Their sneakers were bright and new. Their voices filled space like they'd never been told it mattered who else was using it. One of them noticed Walter almost immediately. "Whoa," he said, not lowering his voice. "Is this place doing history lessons now?" The others laughed. Walter's gaze dropped to the table. His hands tightened around the edge, knuckles pale. He had learned long ago that silence sometimes shortened things. Sometimes it didn't. A chair scraped. A foot nudged one of the crutches. Not hard enough to call an accident. Not light enough to be one. Walter shifted, breath catching, balance wavering for a split second too long. The room went still. Ethan set his mug down. He did not stand right away. He looked at the boys, then at Walter, then at Rex. Rex met his eyes, one brief exchange, silent and complete. Ethan slid out of the booth and stood. He didn't rush. He didn't square his shoulders. He walked over and placed himself between the boys and the old man, posture open, hands relaxed at his sides. "Enough," Ethan said. The word wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. One of the boys snorted. "Relax, man. We're just—" "Apologize," Ethan said. Rex stepped forward half a pace and stopped. Ears up, body angled, stillness with weight behind it. Phones came out. From a corner booth, a man in a tailored coat watched with a small, interested smile. Ethan didn't see him yet. He was looking at Walter, making sure the old man was steady. He rested a hand briefly on the edge of the booth, not touching, but close enough to be felt. "You're all right," Ethan said quietly. It wasn't a question. Outside, the wind rattled the windows again, and the bell above the door swayed without ringing, as if the diner itself was holding its breath. The diner didn't erupt. It held its breath. Ethan stood between the boys and Walter Briggs, the space around him suddenly smaller, heavier. The low hum of conversation collapsed into silence, the kind that presses against your ears. Someone's phone camera whirred to life, the sound loud in a room that had decided not to move. Rex stayed glued to Ethan's left side, not touching, not leaning, just there. The German shepherd's ears were upright now, eyes fixed and unreadable. He didn't bare teeth. He didn't growl. The restraint itself felt louder than noise. The tactical collar sat tight against his neck. RX stamped like a name earned, not given. One of the boys laughed, a short burst meant to prove he wasn't scared. It landed wrong. "You serious, man?" he said. "Over some old guy and, what, your war dog?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He reached down, picked up the metal chair beside the booth and lifted it. Not high, not swinging, just enough. The scrape of steel legs against tile cut through the diner like a blade. Every head snapped toward the sound. The chair hovered in Ethan's hands, angled, not raised to strike, not blocking, simply present. Ethan's grip was steady. No shaking. No rush. The boys stopped laughing. "This ends now," Ethan said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the weight of commands that had once crossed deserts and mattered because lives depended on them. "You apologize," he continued, eyes moving from one boy to the next. To him, out loud. The boy with the phone swallowed. The grin slipped. "You can't threaten us with that." Ethan tilted the chair just slightly, enough for the legs to tap the floor once. Clack. "I'm not threatening you," Ethan said. "I'm stopping this." Behind him, Walter's breath came shallow and fast. Years of being told to endure rose up in his chest, telling him to say it was fine, to make himself smaller, to let it go. Ethan didn't turn around, but his next words were for Walter. "You don't have to accept this," he said quietly. Rex shifted half a step forward and stopped. His body angled, not aggressive, not loose, ready without permission. The boy who had reached for the leash earlier didn't even look at it now. From behind the counter, Marianne found her voice. "That's enough," she said, louder this time. "You apologize, or you leave. Now." One boy glanced toward the door. Another looked down at his shoes. The confidence that had carried them in was draining fast, pooling on the tile between their feet. Phones kept recording. "Say it," Ethan said. The chair never moved. Finally, the tallest boy cleared his throat. "Sorry," he muttered. Ethan's eyes hardened. "Try again." The boy's face flushed. He looked at Walter for the first time, not as a prop, not as a joke, but as a person sitting right there, shaking slightly, waiting to be erased or acknowledged. "I'm sorry," the boy said, louder. "We shouldn't have..." "Shouldn't have what?" Ethan asked. There was no anger in the question, just insistence. The boy exhaled. "We shouldn't have messed with you." Silence followed, thicker this time. Real. Ethan lowered the chair slowly and set it back against the table. The sound it made was soft, final. "Leave," he said. They didn't argue. Chairs scraped as the boys backed away. One cursed under his breath. Another stuffed his phone into his pocket, recording abandoned halfway through the truth. The bell over the door rang sharp as they spilled back into the cold air. Laughter gone, footsteps quick. The diner breathed again. Ethan turned and set the chair fully in place, then crouched slightly so he wasn't towering over Walter. "You all right?" he asked. Walter nodded, though his eyes were wet now. "I didn't think anyone would..." Ethan shook his head once. "You don't owe anyone silence." Marianne appeared beside them with a bowl of soup, hands steady now, jaw set like she'd made a decision she wasn't taking back. "Same as always," she said to Walter, setting it down gently. "And you take as long as you need." Walter wrapped his hands around the bowl. Steam fogged his glasses. "Thank you," he whispered. Ethan returned to his booth. Rex followed and sat, posture unchanged, eyes scanning the room like a guard resuming watch. Conversations restarted in careful tones. People avoided looking at Ethan directly, but they felt him there. They felt Rex. They felt the moment. From the corner booth, the man in the tailored coat finally stood. He straightened his cuffs, paid in cash, and paused by Ethan's table. His smile was thin, curious. Strong grip, he said, glancing at the chair. Strong presence. Ethan met his eyes. Strong boundaries. The man's smile widened, just a little too pleased, and he walked out. Rex's ears followed him to the door. Ethan watched the bell sway, a familiar weight settling in his chest. He had hoped for quiet. He had gotten attention instead. Outside, the tide kept moving, indifferent as ever, but inside the diner, something had shifted, and it wouldn't be easy to push back. By noon, Harbor Point was pretending nothing had happened. The tide rolled in on schedule. Trucks moved along the road by the docks. The Lighthouse Diner refilled mugs and flipped eggs like it always had. If you listened carefully, you could almost believe the morning had been ordinary. Almost. Ethan Walker knew better. He sat in his truck with the engine off, Rex in the passenger seat, both of them watching the diner through the windshield. The bell above the door swayed slightly each time someone went in or out, its tired ring drifting into the air like a memory that refused to settle. Ethan hadn't planned to stay this long. He had come to Harbor Point for quiet, for water and space and the illusion that the war had finally loosened its grip. But the war had a way of recognizing itself, in the posture of an old man protecting his dignity, in the confidence of boys who had never been told no, in the way power leaned on silence and expected it to hold. Rex shifted and looked at him. "I know," Ethan murmured. They went back inside. The diner felt different now. Not hostile, not warm either. Cautious. People looked up, then away. A man at the counter stirred his coffee too long. A woman by the window pretended to read a menu she already knew by heart. Marianne caught Ethan's eye from behind the counter and nodded once. Gratitude, yes, but also worry. Walter Briggs wasn't there. Ethan noticed the empty booth immediately. Marianne leaned over when she brought his coffee. "Ambulance checked him," she said quietly. "Bruised shoulder. Shook up. His daughter took him home." Ethan nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated. "They've been calling." He didn't ask who. "The parents," she continued. "And someone else. Talking about complaints. About dogs. About—" She stopped herself, lips tightening. "They want names." Ethan wrapped his hands around the mug. "Did you give them any?" Marianne shook her head. "Not yet." Rex lay down at Ethan's feet, head up, eyes open, waiting. The owner appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel that never quite got clean. Arthur Bell, Artie to everyone who'd known him long enough. Mid-60s, thinning hair under a faded cap, stomach softened by years of comfort food and avoidance. "We don't want trouble," Artie said quietly, not looking at Ethan directly. Ethan studied him. "Nobody ever does." Artie swallowed. "Camera wasn't working this morning." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "It worked yesterday." Artie's jaw worked like he was chewing on a truth he didn't want to swallow. "Been acting up." Rex's ears tipped forward. Not aggressive, just attentive. Ethan didn't argue. He had learned long ago that lies born of fear weren't beaten into submission. They collapsed on their own when enough weight was placed beside them. Outside, the afternoon light shifted. The diner emptied slowly, conversations thinning until only the clink of dishes remained. Ethan paid his bill and stood. Marianne watched him go like she wanted to say more but didn't yet know how. The first call came an hour later. Ethan was back at the motel by the docks, a narrow building with peeling paint and a neon sign that buzzed like an anxious insect. He sat on the edge of the bed, Rex lying nearby, when the phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. He answered. "You made a scene this morning," a pleasant voice said. Ethan didn't respond. In our town, the voice continued, we prefer misunderstandings to be resolved quietly. I resolved it, Ethan said, a soft chuckle. That depends on perspective. Ethan could picture the man without trying. Tailored coat, calm smile, the kind of confidence that came from never being the one who paid. Leave, the voice said. Take your dog. Let this fade. And Walter? Ethan asked. A pause. Measured. Mr. Briggs is old, confused. He's already signed a statement. Says he tripped. Says you frightened him. Ethan felt something settle cold in his chest. I'll check on him, Ethan said. The line went dead. Ethan stood for a long moment, then reached into his duffel. He pulled out the old photograph. 6 men in desert gear, younger, smiling like they didn't yet know what memory could do to a spine. He studied it, then set it face down. Rex rose and pressed his head against Ethan's thigh. Not leaving, Ethan said quietly. They found Walter's house just inland, a narrow clapboard place with peeling paint and a porch that sagged in the middle. The door opened slowly when Ethan knocked. Walter looked smaller than he had in the diner. His shoulders curved inward, not from age alone, but from the weight of being told to keep the peace at his own expense. They said it would be easier, Walter admitted, eyes down. Just paperwork. Ethan sat across from him at the kitchen table, Rex lying at his feet like a sentry carved from patience. Easier for who? Ethan asked. Walter didn't answer. You didn't do anything wrong, Ethan said, and you're not weak for wanting it to stop. Walter's hands trembled. I fought once, he said. I thought that was enough. Ethan held his gaze. It was. And it still is. As they talked, a shadow moved past the window. Later that evening, Ethan walked the alley behind the diner. The dumpsters smelled of grease and wet cardboard. A young man stood there smoking, shoulders tight, eyes darting. Noah Porter, Ethan said. The kid stiffened. I don't want trouble. I'm not here to give you any, Ethan replied. I'm here because you were holding your phone the right way this morning. Noah swallowed. I saw everything. And? They came by my place, Noah whispered. Smiled. Told me accidents happen. Ethan didn't rush him. He waited. I still have it, Noah said finally. The video. Ethan nodded once. You don't have to stand alone. Night settled over Harbor Point like a held breath. Back at the motel, Ethan sent a message to a number he hadn't used in years. Need help. Standing post again. The reply came faster than he expected. Roger that. Rex lifted his head, ears forward, as if he felt the shift before Ethan did. The town thought it could erase a morning with silence. It was about to learn that silence, once broken, remembered how to speak. Harbor Point woke up the next morning wearing its normal face. Coffee steamed behind fogged windows. A man hosed salt off his boat deck. The same gulls screamed like they owned the sky. If you didn't know what to listen for, you'd miss the shift entirely. The way doors closed a second faster. The way people spoke a second softer. The way eyes slid away from Ethan Walker like looking too long might cost them something. Ethan noticed. He noticed because he'd lived in places where fear wasn't announced. It was measured, rationed, handed out like a warning. At the motel, the neon sign buzzed all night, and the walls were thin enough to hear footsteps in the hallway. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed with his boots on, the old habit returning without permission. Rex lay across from him, head up, ears shifting with every sound outside. Noah's video sat on Ethan's phone now. Short, clear, unedited. Walter's crutch, the shove, the chair lifted. Ethan stepping in with controlled motion, the boys' laughter turning brittle. It wasn't dramatic, but it didn't need to be. Truth rarely did. Ethan made copies. He sent them where he could. One to his own secure storage, one to an old friend who understood discretion, one to a number that had answered him last night with Roger that. Then he waited for the next move. It came at 9:12 a.m., a call from the local station. "Mr. Walker," a careful voice said, "this is Officer Daniel Keene. We'd like you to come in and clear up a misunderstanding. Standard procedure." "Am I being charged with something?" Ethan asked. A pause. "Not at this time." Ethan looked at Rex. "We'll be there," Ethan said. The station sat 2 streets off Main, a squat, pale brick building with flags that looked tired in the sea wind. Inside, it smelled like disinfectant, old paper, and burnt coffee. A receptionist glanced at Ethan's veteran cap and then quickly looked away, as if even respect had become risky. Officer Daniel Keene met them in the lobby. Keene was early 40s, average build, close-cropped hair, clean-shaven. His eyes carried exhaustion the way some men carried weight, quietly, constantly. There was a faint indentation on his ring finger where a band had been removed too often, as if home life had become complicated. He nodded at Ethan, then at Rex. "Dog stays with you?" Keene asked. "He stays with me," Ethan replied. Keene didn't argue. He led them down a hallway and into a small interview room where fluorescent light made everyone look guilty by default. Rex lay at Ethan's feet, head on paws, calm but awake. Keene sat across with a folder and a pen. He clicked once, then stopped. "I'm going to ask some questions," Keene said. "Answer them straight." Ethan nodded. Keene opened the folder. "We've received statements that you threatened a group of minors with a chair, that your dog was used to intimidate them, that Mr. Briggs was confused and may have fallen on his own." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, not with anger, recognition. "Did you lift a chair?" Keene asked. "Yes," Ethan said. Keene blinked. He'd expected denial. "Why?" "Because words weren't working," Ethan replied calmly. "I didn't swing it. I didn't touch anyone with it. I used it to stop what was happening." Keene wrote that down. "Did your dog threaten them?" Keene asked. Ethan glanced at Rex. Rex stayed under control the entire time. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He didn't make contact. Keene's pen paused. "You're aware," Keene said carefully, "that people in this town have influence." "I'm aware," Ethan answered. Keene leaned back slightly. His eyes flicked to the camera in the corner of the room, then away, fast. "And you're aware the diner's security system conveniently stopped recording yesterday morning?" Ethan watched him. "Convenient." Keene's mouth tightened. He wasn't disagreeing. He was surviving. "Look," Keene said quietly, voice dropping a notch. "Off the record? I don't think you came here looking for trouble, but trouble found you, and now it's waking up." Ethan didn't fill the silence. He'd learned silence could be useful when someone else was trying to decide how much truth they could afford. Keene exhaled. "Mr. Briggs came in earlier," he admitted. "He signed a statement, says he tripped, says he doesn't want to pursue anything." Ethan's hands curled slowly into fists, then loosened again. "Where is he now?" Ethan asked. Keene hesitated. "At home." "I want to see him," Ethan said. Keene looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "I can't stop you." Ethan stood. Rex rose in the same second, seamless. As Ethan reached the door, Keene added, "Mr. Walker, be careful. People don't just make problems disappear here. They move them onto someone smaller." Ethan didn't turn back. "I know." Outside, the sky was bright and cold. The wind had teeth. Ethan's breath turned white as he walked with Rex toward the truck. Halfway across the lot, a dark SUV rolled in slowly and parked 2 spaces away. Expensive, clean, out of place. The driver didn't get out. The window lowered an inch. A familiar voice drifted out, pleasant as a handshake. "You're persistent." Ethan stopped. In the passenger seat sat Calvin Rourke, the man from the diner's corner booth. Tailored coat, groomed beard, smile that never reached his eyes. He looked like money had trained him to be calm. "You could have left," Rourke said. "You didn't." Ethan's gaze stayed steady. "They could have behaved. They didn't." Rourke chuckled softly, as if Ethan had said something charming. "This town doesn't like outsiders rewriting the rules." "I'm not rewriting anything," Ethan replied. "I'm asking people to follow what's already right." Rourke's smile thinned. "Right is flexible, Mr. Walker, especially when people get frightened." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Walter's frightened." Rourke leaned a fraction closer to the window. "Walter is old. He wants peace. He wants his days quiet." His voice stayed gentle. "So do you, I assume. Take your dog and go. Let the story die." Ethan didn't move. Rex didn't move either. Ears forward, body still, the shape of a warning without sound. Rourke sighed as if disappointed. "You know," he said, "I'd hate for Walter to have another accident. His porch steps are uneven. His railing is loose. Coastal weather makes wood unreliable." The words slid under Ethan's skin like cold water. "Was that a threat?" Ethan asked. Rourke smiled again, softer now. "A concern? I'm a concerned citizen." Ethan stepped closer to the SUV, not fast, controlled. "Micha, if anything happens to him," Ethan said, voice low, "you won't like what comes after." Rourke's eyebrows lifted, amused. "There it is. The warrior." He shook his head lightly. "Harbor Point will chew you up, Mr. Walker. You and your dog. It always does." The window rose. The SUV rolled away. Ethan stood in the wind for a long moment, watching taillights disappear down Main like nothing had happened. Then Rex pressed his head against Ethan's thigh. Solid, warm, present. Ethan rested a hand on Rex's neck and breathed slow. "No," he murmured. "Not this time." They drove to Walter's house. The porch light was broken. The front door was closed, but the frame looked wrong, like it had been tested. A flower pot lay shattered on the steps. Not destruction. A message. Ethan knocked. It took too long for the door to open. When Walter finally appeared, his face was pale and drawn. His hands shook around his crutch, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "They came by," Walter whispered. Ethan stepped inside without asking, his presence filling the small living room with a kind of steady that felt unfamiliar there. Rex entered and sat immediately, eyes scanning corners, ears catching sounds the human ear ignored. Walter swallowed. "They didn't touch me," he said quickly, like he needed Ethan to know. "They just made sure I understood." Ethan's chest tightened. "They're not doing this because they're winning," Ethan said, kneeling slightly to meet Walter's eyes. "They're doing it because they're afraid of what you could say if you weren't alone." Walter's eyes glistened. "I don't want trouble." "I know," Ethan replied, "but you deserve peace that isn't purchased with silence." Walter stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Small, trembling, but real. Outside, the wind rattled the house like it wanted in. Ethan stood and pulled out his phone. He didn't call for a fight. He called for witnesses. Because in war, you held ground. In towns like Harbor Point, you held truth. And Ethan Walker was done pretending he didn't know how. Harbor Point didn't feel smaller the next day. It felt closer. The kind of closeness that pressed in from all sides without touching you. The kind that made a man measure his steps, his words, even his breathing. Ethan Walker noticed it the moment he stepped out of Walter Briggs's house. 2 blocks down, a sedan idled too long at a stop sign. At the corner store, a conversation stopped when he entered. At the docks, a man he didn't know nodded once. Quick, respectful, and gone. Pressure didn't announce itself with noise. It arrived with attention. Ethan drove Walter back inside and checked the locks himself. He fixed the porch light temporarily, screwing in a spare bulb from his truck. Small things, practical things. The kind that told someone watching that this house was no longer unattended. Rex sat on the porch the entire time, body relaxed but eyes alive, tracking the street with steady precision. "I don't want you dragged into this," Walter said quietly. Ethan tightened the bulb, stepped down, and met the old man's gaze. "I'm already in it." Walter's mouth twitched. "You always were stubborn." Ethan didn't deny it. Back at the motel, Ethan laid everything out on the narrow bed. His phone, the video files, a folded notebook he rarely used, and the old Trident pin he'd almost forgotten was still in his duffel. He didn't put the pin on. He set it where he could see it. Rex lay beside the bed, chin on the mattress, eyes following Ethan's hands. "They're not going to stop," Ethan said softly. "They're going to make you think you're alone." Rex blinked once. Agreement, not emotion. Ethan started making calls, not many, and not loud ones. The first went to a retired Marine who now ran a small security firm 2 counties over. The second to a former Army JAG who'd traded courtrooms for teaching. The third to a woman who ran a veterans support group that quietly knew everyone worth knowing. He didn't ask for favors. He asked for eyes. By noon, Noah Porter hadn't answered his phone. That worried Ethan more than threats. He found Noah's apartment above a closed bait shop near the docks. The door was shut. The blinds were drawn tight. When Ethan knocked, the sound inside was movement. Not footsteps, but something being slid into place. Noah opened the door a crack. "They were here," Noah whispered before Ethan could speak. His eyes were red, his jaw clenched like he'd been holding it all night. "2 men, suits, polite, told me it was better if the video disappeared." "Did it?" Ethan asked. Noah shook his head. "I copied it, sent it to an email I don't use, to my sister's cloud, to myself." "Good," Ethan thought. "They said I could lose my job," Noah continued, "that I could lose my place." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, not crowding, not rushing. "You don't have to do anything else," he said. "You've already done enough." Noah stared at him. "That's what they want me to believe." Ethan nodded. "Yes." "And?" Noah asked. "And they're wrong." Ethan handed him a card. No logo, no title, just a number. "If anyone comes back, you call, day or night." Noah exhaled, a shaky sound that carried relief and fear in equal measure. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan considered the question. "Because once," he said, "someone stood when I couldn't." That night, the pressure changed shape. Walter's phone rang twice after dark. He didn't answer. His neighbor's porch light flicked on and off like a signal. A local paper ran a short piece online. No names, just a vague headline about a diner disturbance involving an outsider and a dog. Rex growled once at the motel window. Low, controlled. Ethan stepped closer and saw a shadow move across the parking lot, then disappear. No confrontation, just presence. They want me tired, Ethan thought. They want me reactive. He didn't give them either. Instead, he sent the video to 3 places at once. A regional reporter known for not backing down, the veterans group's legal liaison, and the JAG professor who understood how evidence moved before it was strangled. Then he waited. The call from Calvin Rourke came just after midnight. "You're making this expensive," Rourke said pleasantly. "You're making it visible," Ethan replied. Rourke chuckled. "Visibility fades. People forget." "Not when there's a record," Ethan said. A pause. A longer one this time. "You think this ends in your favor?" Rourke asked. "You think a town chooses you over itself?" Ethan's voice stayed level. "I think a town remembers who it is when it's forced to look." Rourke sighed, as if bored. "You're not a hero, Mr. Walker. You're a problem." Ethan glanced at Rex. "Problems get solved," he said. "Truth gets out." The line went dead. The next morning, Harbor Point woke to something new. Cars began parking near Walter's house. Not many, just enough. A woman with a cane walked up his steps with a casserole. A man in a faded service jacket stood across the street pretending to check his phone. Marianne dropped off groceries without comment. They didn't speak. They didn't announce anything. They stayed. At the station, Officer Keene watched the security feed from the front desk and frowned. He didn't call Ethan. He didn't call Rourke either. He called someone else. Someone older. Someone careful. By afternoon, the regional reporter requested comment. By evening, a formal notice arrived. A preliminary hearing scheduled within days. Ethan stood on the motel walkway as the sun sank low, painting the water copper and gray. Rex sat beside him, posture easy but ready. "They're adjusting," Ethan said. Rex's ears flicked toward the street where a familiar SUV slowed, then continued on. "They didn't expect witnesses," Ethan continued. "They expected silence." Rex leaned lightly into Ethan's leg. For the first time since Harbor Point, Ethan allowed himself a breath that wasn't measured. The game was still being played. But now, it wasn't theirs alone. The hearing was set for Thursday morning. Not a trial. Not yet. Just enough formality to test how deep the rot went, and how much pressure the truth could take before it bent. Harbor Point felt the date like a change in weather. People didn't talk about it openly. They adjusted their routines instead. Ethan Walker noticed the adjustments. He noticed the way cars slowed near Walter Briggs's house, then kept going. The way strangers stood a little straighter when he passed, eyes meeting his for half a second longer than before. He noticed the absence too. The men who used to nod and now didn't. The doors that didn't open as easily. Rex noticed everything else. The German Shepherd moved closer to Ethan's leg when they walked, not from fear, but from calculation. His ears tracked sound before it arrived. His posture never changed. Calm, disciplined, ready. At the motel, Ethan reviewed the plan again. Not a battle plan, a sequence. Who arrived first? Who sat where? Who spoke and when? He didn't rehearse words. He rehearsed order. In chaos, order was mercy. The phone buzzed. Unknown number, Ethan answered. "You don't know me," a woman said. Her voice was steady, practiced. "My name is Carol Hughes. I handle dogs for the veterans group. I'll be outside the courthouse tomorrow." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. "Thank you." I'll keep Rex, she continued. He won't be a distraction. He'll be a presence. He always is, Ethan said. The line disconnected. No ceremony. No praise. That evening, Ethan drove to Walter's house again. He didn't knock this time. Walter opened the door as if he'd been waiting behind it. They called, Walter said immediately. Ethan stepped inside. The living room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old books. Medals hung on the wall in a dusty frame, half hidden, like even they had learned to keep quiet. What did they say? Ethan asked. Walter swallowed. That I could make this all go away. That I don't need the stress. That I should remember how fragile things are. Ethan's jaw tightened. Did they threaten you? Walter hesitated, then nodded once. Not with words. Ethan sat across from him at the kitchen table. Rex lay down at his feet, head resting on paws, eyes open. You don't have to be brave, Ethan said. You just have to be honest. Walter stared at his hands. They shook slightly. I signed papers once because someone told me it would keep the peace, he said quietly. I was wrong then, too. Ethan leaned forward, voice low but steady. Tomorrow, you don't carry this alone. Walter looked up. Something like relief flickered there, and fear, too. What if they ruin me? They won't, Ethan said. They need you quiet. They can't afford you broken. Outside, a car passed slowly, tires whispering on pavement. Later that night, Noah Porter called. They came back, Noah said, breath tight. Different men this time. Said my sister's name like it was nothing. Are you safe right now? Ethan asked. Yes, I'm not alone. Good, Ethan said. You won't be. Ethan made one last call before sleep, to the retired JAG professor. They'll try to shake Walter, the professor said after listening. They'll suggest confusion, memory, fatigue. They already have, Ethan replied. Then we anchor him, the professor said. Facts, dates, small truths he can hold without strain. Ethan nodded, even though the man couldn't see it. Sleep came in fragments. Morning arrived clear and cold, the kind that made everything sharp on purpose. The courthouse sat at the edge of town, old stone steps worn smooth by generations who'd climbed them hoping for fairness. Ethan arrived early, Walter beside him. Walter wore his old jacket, pressed carefully, medals pinned inside where they didn't flash. Rex stayed outside with Carol Hughes. Carol was shorter than Ethan, sturdy, hair cut practical, eyes kind and sharp. She knelt briefly to Rex's level, clipped the lead with calm confidence, and nodded once to Ethan. He's with me. Rex didn't resist. He sat at her side, eyes following Ethan until the doors closed, then returned forward, on post. Inside, the courtroom filled slowly, not with protesters, not with cameras, with people. Men and women entered quietly, one or two at a time. Some walked stiffly, some leaned on canes, some carried nothing visible at all. They took seats without speaking, without ceremony. A wall assembled itself, not to block anything, just to be seen. Marianne slipped in near the aisle, wearing a simple navy dress. Her hands were folded tight in her lap, knuckles white, back straight. At the front, Calvin Rourke sat with his attorney, Vanessa Crowley, sharp suit, sharper eyes. Rourke looked relaxed, like a man who had purchased outcomes before and expected the same today. His gaze flicked once to the gallery. It paused. Calculation replaced ease. The judge entered. Judge Eleanor Whitman, silver hair pulled back, expression unreadable. She took in the room with one slow sweep and sat. Proceedings began with routine words that tried to make the moment smaller than it was. Rourke's attorney spoke first. Calm, polished. She framed the incident as confusion, fear, an overreaction by an outsider with a dog trained for intimidation. She spoke as if repetition could become truth. Then witnesses were called. Marianne stood. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. She described the shove. The chair lifted but never swung, the apology demanded. She described Rex's restraint. She didn't editorialize. She didn't apologize. Noah followed. He looked smaller under the lights, but his words were clear. He spoke of the video, of the visits, of the smiles that weren't friendly. He handed over his phone. The video played. The scrape of the chair legs echoed in the room. The laughter. The shift. Ethan stepping in. The apology. The truth, uncut. Walter stood last. He took a breath that looked like it cost him something, and spoke slowly, carefully. "I was scared," he said. "Not of falling, of being erased." He looked at Rourke when he said it. "I fought for this country," Walter continued. "I didn't think I'd have to fight to be treated like a person at home." Silence followed. Real silence. Ethan felt it settle. Judge Whitman recessed briefly. When she returned, her voice carried no drama. "This court will not be used to rehearse fear," she said evenly. "The statements coerced from Mr. Briggs are invalid. The allegations against Mr. Walker are dismissed. An investigation into intimidation and obstruction is ordered." The gavel came down. Not loud. Final. Outside, the veterans stood, not in salute, not in protest, just standing. Witnesses to a moment that would try to shrink later. Walter exhaled. His shoulders lifted. He looked taller. Ethan placed a steady hand at his back as they stepped into the light. Rex waited at the bottom of the steps, on post. The courthouse emptied without ceremony. No cheers, no speeches. Just the soft shuffle of shoes on stone and the slow return of breath to lungs that had been holding it too long. Outside, the light felt warmer than it had any right to, as if the day itself had decided to soften after the strain. Ethan Walker stood at the top of the steps for a moment longer than necessary. He wasn't waiting for congratulations. He wasn't scanning for threats. He was listening for the echo that always followed moments like this. The sound that told you whether a place had learned something or whether it planned to forget as soon as it could. Below, Rex sat with Carol Hughes, posture unchanged. When Ethan stepped down, Rex's ears tipped toward him, then forward again. Still on post. Always. Walter Briggs paused halfway down the steps, breath shallow, then steadied himself and continued. At the bottom, he stopped. He didn't rush. He didn't apologize for the time it took. He placed a hand on Rex's head, firm, grateful, and nodded once. "Good dog," Walter said, voice rough. Rex accepted the praise with a calm blink. Nothing more. Marianne hovered near the edge of the small crowd, hands clasped like she wasn't sure what to do with them now that doing something had worked. When Walter reached her, she smiled through tears she didn't bother to hide. "Ah, soup's on me," she said, trying to keep it light. Walter smiled back, smaller than her smile but steadier than it had been in days. "I'll take it." People drifted away in twos and threes. Some nodded to Ethan, some didn't. A few looked like they wanted to say thank you, but didn't trust the habit yet. Courage took time to become muscle. Calvin Rourke left last. He exited through a side door, expression set, phone already at his ear. He didn't look at Ethan. He didn't need to. Men like Rourke didn't rage when they lost. They recalculated. They waited. Ethan watched him go without satisfaction. Victory never felt like the movies promised. It felt like responsibility that hadn't been fully discharged yet. That afternoon, Harbor Point tried on its new shape. At the diner, the same booth waited by the window. Walter slid into it with care, crutches resting where they always had. Marianne set the bowl down gently, steam rising like a benediction. "Same as always," she said. Walter wrapped his hands around the bowl and nodded. "Same as good." Ethan sat across from him. Rex took his place at Ethan's side, the floor his anchor, the room his responsibility. Outside, the water moved with patient indifference. "They'll try again," Walter said quietly, not looking up. Ethan didn't argue. "Yes, but not the same way," Walter added after a moment. Ethan studied him. The old man's shoulders were still curved, still tired, but something had shifted behind his eyes. Not confidence, not bravado, permission. "Not the same way," Ethan agreed. Noah Porter stopped by after his shift, hands shoved into his jacket pockets like he wasn't sure they belonged to him yet. He didn't sit. He didn't stay long. "I'm moving in with my sister," he said. "For a bit." "That's smart," Ethan said. Noah nodded. "I just wanted to say thanks for not pushing." Ethan met his gaze. "You pushed when it counted." Noah left lighter than he'd arrived. By evening, the town had opinions. Some said the judge had been fair. Some said she'd been pressured. Some said the whole thing had been blown out of proportion. A few said nothing at all, which was new. Ethan walked the docks as the sun sank low, Rex beside him. The boards creaked underfoot. Salt hung in the air. The world felt wide again in the way it only did near water. Carol Hughes met them there, leash in hand. "We'll keep an eye," she said simply. "On Walter, on the diner." Ethan nodded. "Thank you." She shrugged, like gratitude was unnecessary. "It's what we do." That night, Ethan returned to the motel and packed his duffel. Not because he was running, because he was finished here. He folded the faded multicam jacket carefully, set the veteran cap on top, tucked the dog tags beneath the gray shirt so they wouldn't clink. The black watch stayed on his wrist. Time still mattered. He paused with the old trident pin in his palm, then set it back in the bag. Not today. Rex watched from the doorway, tail still, eyes steady. "You ready?" Ethan asked. Rex rose and stepped forward. Before dawn, Ethan drove one last time past Walter's house. The porch light was on. The railing had been repaired. A car sat out front. Someone staying the night, just in case. Ethan didn't stop. Some watches ended when others took over. At the edge of town, he pulled over and killed the engine. The horizon was a thin line of gray. He breathed slow and deep, the way he had learned to when leaving one place for another. He hadn't come to Harbor Point to fight. He hadn't come to be remembered. He had come for quiet, and found something else instead. Rex sat beside him, the weight of a presence that didn't ask for permission. Ethan started the truck. Behind him, Harbor Point would decide what it wanted to be. That choice would be made in kitchens and diners, in small conversations and smaller acts of courage. Ahead, the road waited. And Ethan Walker, Kubin Maijan Gyaingu, drove on, still quiet, still disciplined, still willing to stand when standing mattered, even if he never stayed long enough to be thanked. The road out of Harbor Point curved gently along the water. The kind of road that didn't rush you even if you wanted it to. Dawn stretched thin across the horizon, pale and deliberate, turning the sea into a sheet of dull silver. Ethan Walker drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the edge of the seat, where Rex's presence filled the cab without sound. They had gone 10 miles when Ethan felt it, the familiar tug that came not from doubt, but from habit. He pulled over. The engine ticked as it cooled. The world breathed around them. Ethan stepped out and stood at the guardrail, looking down at the water moving the way it always had, indifferent to outcomes, faithful to motion. Rex sat beside him, ears forward, eyes on the far line where sea met sky. "You know," Ethan said quietly, "this is where I usually leave." Rex didn't move. In war, Ethan had learned that leaving was easy. Staying was complicated. Afterward, he'd learned the opposite. Staying became quiet, while leaving took effort. Every town asked the same question in a different voice. "Will you carry this with you, or will you put it down here?" Ethan breathed slow and answered the way he always did. He got back in the truck and drove on. Back in Harbor Point, the diner opened like it always had. The bell rang once. The griddle warmed. Marianne poured the first coffee of the day and set a mug by the window out of habit before she remembered Ethan wouldn't be there. Walter Briggs came in anyway. He moved carefully, but without apology. The repaired porch light at his house had stayed on all night, and the new railing felt solid under his hand when he'd left. He chose the same booth. Marianne brought the soup without asking. Outside, two men stood near the curb pretending to discuss fishing. A woman with a cane waited across the street. None of them spoke to Walter. None of them needed to. They were there to be seen. At the station, Officer Keene read an email twice before closing his laptop. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He made a note, then another, then stood and spoke quietly to a colleague who nodded and followed him down the hall. Small movements, correct ones. At the edge of town, Calvin Rourke's SUV passed through a green light without stopping. He didn't look left or right. He didn't slow. Men like him understood momentum. When it turned, you stepped aside or got dragged. The day went on. Someone tried to start a rumor, soft, harmless sounding, about outsiders and dogs. It didn't land. It didn't stick. The words slid off people who had learned how they felt when silence cost too much. By afternoon, the diner filled. Laughter returned. Not loud, not careless, but real. A man paid for the table behind him without announcing it. Marianne caught herself smiling and didn't stop. Walter finished his soup and sat for a while longer than usual, watching the window. When he stood, it was slower than he wanted, and faster than he feared. "Same time tomorrow?" Marianne asked. Walter nodded. "Same time." Outside, a boy from the morning before stood across the street with his hands in his pockets. He didn't approach. He didn't film. He watched Walter walk past and then looked down at the ground, something like recognition flickering across his face. Walter kept walking. The road widened, the water fell away. Ethan drove until the sky changed color and the land flattened into fields. He stopped once for gas, once for coffee. At neither place did he speak more than necessary. At both, Rex stayed close, posture unchanged, presence steady. By late afternoon, Ethan pulled into a rest area overlooking a stretch of river that moved slower than the sea. He sat on the hood with the veteran cap in his hands, turning it once, then setting it back on his head. The black military watch ticked on his wrist. Time didn't heal anything on its own. It only gave you room to decide what you'd do with it. Ethan thought of Walter's hands on the soup bowl, of Marianne's voice when it didn't break, of Noah sending the video even when it scared him, of the veterans in the courtroom standing without instruction. He thought of Rex, still on post. "Not bad," Ethan said softly. Rex shifted closer, shoulder touching Ethan's leg, warm and solid. A reminder that discipline could be gentle, that loyalty didn't need ceremony. Ethan reached into the duffel and pulled out the old trident pin. He turned it once between his fingers, then placed it back inside and zipped the bag closed. Some symbols were meant to be carried quietly. The sun dropped low. The river caught fire with reflected light, and then let it go. Ethan stood, stretched, and climbed back into the truck. As he pulled onto the road again, his phone buzzed once. A message from an unfamiliar number, all quiet. "We're here." Ethan read it, then set the phone face down. "Good," he said. The truck moved forward, steady and unremarkable. The kind of movement that didn't announce itself but mattered anyway. Behind him, Harbor Point would keep learning. Ahead, another place would ask the same quiet question. Ethan Walker drove on. Not chasing trouble, not avoiding it either, carrying the discipline of a soldier, the restraint of a man who had seen too much, and the certainty that dignity survived wherever ordinary people chose not to look away. Beside him, Rex sat, ears up, eyes forward, on post.